Kanye West has been banned from visiting the UK to perform. Given his history of anti-Semitic remarks and behaviour, why is this decision dividing people? West was due to visit the UK this summer to perform at a festival until the UK government intervened, saying his presence in the country would, quote, not be conducive to the public good. West has apologised for his behaviour multiple times and blamed his bipolar disorder. But what does his continued popularity tell us about how mainstream anti-Semitism has become? This is The Global Story on YouTube. Well, I'm very pleased to say that to help us decipher this very complex story, we're joined by from Manchester by Anushka Mutanda-Dowty, the BBC's host of Fame Under Fire podcast, and my mentor for all things pop culture and youth culture. Anushka, I'm hoping you can help me understand what's going on, please.
Well, I mean, trying to decipher the world of Kanye. Are we calling him Kanye or are we going to call him Ye? He prefers Ye.
Well, that was going to be my first question.
Yeah.
What is the correct thing and how are we going to proceed?
I think we should go with Kanye because I think that's what most people know him as.
So, Anushka, this week we've learned that Kanye West has been banned from visiting the United Kingdom in a somewhat dramatic decision by the UK government. Tell us what led up to this.
A few weeks ago, it was leaked online that Kanye was going to headline a festival called Wireless. Wireless is a festival in the UK. It's known for having a lot of rap artists that perform there, and some people say it's the only real festival that caters to that market in the UK. So that was leaked online and it was circulated by a lot of the blogs, and it was circulated to quite positive reception. A lot of the comments were like, you can't cancel Kanye, this is amazing, well done to Wireless for standing up to cancel culture. And then this week on the 30th of March, it was announced that he would be headlining 3 nights, so headlining every single day at Wireless. But then the sponsors start pulling out. We've got Pepsi, which is the biggest sponsor of Wireless. Diageo pulled out, and then there is a public call for why is he headlining at Wireless? Why have they done this? It's disrespectful to the Jewish community. It's disrespectful to the African American community, who Kanye has also said made derogatory comments about. It's disrespectful to women. But the loudest sort of cry was he's been repeatedly anti-Semitic. He's said outrageous things. Why was he chosen to headline Wireless? And then the man who organizes Wireless, its creator, came out and defended that and asked, please find forgiveness for Kanye. So they actually backed him. But then eventually it was said online that the government were reviewing whether he'd be allowed to come into the UK, and then pretty quickly it was actually he's not. His request has been denied.
When did the anti-Semitism accusations against him first begin?
There were sporadic demonstrations of what you could say negative stereotypes about Jewish people in his music. In 2005, in a freestyle, he rapped, "I'm tight with my dough like my family Jews." And that was seen as, perpetuating a negative stereotype about the Jewish community. There were reports that surfaced that in an interview in 2018 with TMZ, he reportedly made pro-Nazi comments that were edited out. So we've had accusations peppered throughout his career. But in 2022, a spree of tweets. He woke up, he says, "I woke up, I'm a bit sleepy tonight, but when I wake up, I'm going DEFCON 3 on Jewish people." He started to praise Hitler and say that he admired Hitler. It started creeping its way into more of his social media posts. I do have to say, a lot of this commentary that he was making, a lot of these anti-Semitic remarks were alongside other remarks that were offensive against other groups. He has been repeatedly misogynistic and encouraged sexual violence on multiple accounts. So we start to see this behavior, these frankly unbelievable tweets that are coming out in 2022. Then in 2023, he apologizes and then he does it again.
What was the context of that apology?
So a lot of people have viewed it as him doing damage control because he was dropped by Adidas. If you remember, he did Yeezy with Adidas. He had some very successful launches of trainers. He was dropped from higher end brands like Balenciaga. He had his Twitter account revoked by Elon Musk, who said that he was violating their policy. So it started to affect Kanye's business. And then in 2023, he made this completely weird remark that watching Jonah Hill in 21 Jump Street, quote, made him like Jewish people again, which some people thinks constitutes an apology. I think the Jewish community will probably say that it does not. But there was an element of damage control. And then in 2025, it goes beyond that. He releases a song. I'm going to warn people now because obviously the title is inflammatory and offensive, but he releases a song called Heil Hitler with the repeated lyric over and over again. I'm not going to keep saying it, but repeated over and over again. That's released by his own platform. So that's not through a label or a distribution service, but he just doubles down. And it's when you look at it in a timeline, you're just like, what is happening here? Because
what was the reception when he released that song?
It's really difficult with Kanye because you're always going to have a group of people who are like, this is atrocious, and the voice of reason, that I cannot believe this is the space that we're in, that somebody is doing this and hasn't been completely ostracized. But when Kanye does these things, it's imbued with an air of, I really don't want to say humor, but it is received online by a rather large community as this is funny. And once you make something funny, you make something forgivable. And that's what has happened. Kanye is humorous. That's why people like him. They always liked him for his humor. He was a witty rapper. He was known for saying things that other people wouldn't say. I'll refer you back to George Bush doesn't care about black people after Katrina. That's what people liked him for. And he's taken that personality, applied it to these horrific statements, and people have run with it as memes. And like I said, when you are laughing, you are forgiving. Look at what Kanye's done. This song is jokes. I can't believe he's done this. You can't cancel Kanye. And it starts to become almost a caricature of what it looks like to be cancelled. And it's this returning joke of like, you just can't cancel this guy because he will just say something more inflammatory, more racist, more xenophobic next week. And then he'll make it into a song, and then he'll make it into merch. You create an atmosphere online where it's like, well, really, what can't he say or do?
And he makes a number of appearances, doesn't he, on controversial right-wing talk shows, right?
Yeah, so Kanye turns up on Alex Jones's podcast and he's wearing it almost looks like he's got a pair of black tights and put it over his face. I'm sure Kanye would like me to talk about it as high fashion, but that is what it looks like to me. And he's wearing a camouflage biker jacket on top of that. He's known for looking ridiculous and claiming it's fashion. So that wasn't crazy for him to turn up looking like that. But then when the podcast got going, he started to say things like, I see good things about Hitler. He has made comments like this before, but once again, it was an example of him not just making anti-Semitic comments, but aligning himself with Hitler.
I mean, one of the things that struck me about that was even Alex Jones, who is no stranger to extreme pronouncements, seemed, I won't say shocked, but maybe uncomfortable at the things that Kanye West was saying on the set of his show.
I mean, this is the thing. Kanye aligned himself after he came out in support of Trump in 2016. He aligned himself quite heavily with Candace Owens, who is a right-wing political commentator. So he very much was existing in that world of right-wing influencers, commentators, however you want to see them. But then you get to the point where Kanye starts saying things that make them feel uncomfortable. And Candace Owens also came out and distanced herself from some of those comments by saying, you know, we need to talk about his mental health. And it became talking about Kanye's mental health. And that was an explanation for what he was doing. But these comments have been repeated and they've also been apologized for and then doubled down on and done again. So he says that on the Alex Jones podcast, but then he also releases a line of merch with a swastika on a t-shirt, which is, I mean, how much more offensive does it get?
So when does he start selling swastika t-shirts, Anushka?
Yeah, so what happens is Kanye does an advert at the Super Bowl. Now, ad space at the Super Bowl is highly coveted because it's one of, if not the most watched sports game in the US. Kanye takes out his own ad at the Super Bowl for his brand. And then when you click onto his website, the only piece of merch he was selling was a t-shirt with a swastika on it. And that was in February 2025. And once again, yes, there's uproar in the mainstream media, but in another world, in another sphere, on social media, on Reddit pages, a lot of it is making light of it. It's funny. Look at what Kanye's done now. He has such a huge fan base. It's been likened to a cult by some critics of Kanye. You know, he called himself Yeezus. That he just seems to get away with it. But the pattern seems to be that when it starts to threaten his earning potential and his brand deals, he comes out and tries to do some form of damage control.
Okay, well, explain how he tries to control the damage then.
So people have been saying that this year was the redemption arc for Kanye West. This was his comeback where he was going to make amends. So Kanye publicly says that he wants to sit down with leaders in the Jewish community, and then he does sit down with a rabbi and he explains what he feels is an explanation for his actions was that he has bipolar disorder, which is something he's spoken about before, but also denied as well. But he seems at this point to be reconciling with the fact that he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and this is the reason for, I don't want to call them outbursts because I think that minimizes what was said, but it was the reason for the anti-Semitic remarks that he's made.
Okay, and then he makes a second apology, right? What happened there?
Yeah, so in the Wall Street Journal, he takes out an ad space and releases a written statement saying to those I've hurt, which is essentially an apology to both the Jewish community and the African American community, who he says were always his home, and he's going to find his way back to them. He was also involved in a car crash, very famous car crash that he says had lasting impacts on him, and this was basically a result of him being unmedicated and refusing to come to terms with his bipolar disorder diagnosis, and this led to him basically being in a 4-month manic episode, he says, where he wrote all these tweets, where he made this song, where he sold these t-shirts, and he apologizes and he asks for time to earn your forgiveness, re-earn forgiveness and re-earn respect. Now, what was going on behind the scenes was Kanye was looking for a distributor to release his album Bully, long anticipated album where the release date kept changing, and he actually ends up in a partnership signing a deal with Gamma. Now, Gamma is...
Which is a record label.
Yeah, Gamma is a company founded by former Apple Music executive Larry Jackson. The reports were that they spoke to Jewish members of staff at Gamma. They consulted them before they entered into this partnership with him. And it was also hinging on him making these public apologies, these public statements. So from a very cynical perspective, the critique has been made that this is just to get this album out so he can continue to make his money and his business can continue to function. If you take Kanye's side of it, this is a man who has been dealing with a bipolar disorder, refusing to be medicated.
Okay, so he introduces in this Wall Street Journal full-page apology, and also in his conversation with the rabbi, the idea that his behavior may be down to his bipolar condition. Now, neither you nor I are trained psychologists, Anushka, but we've been doing a bit of reading around on this topic, and it does seem that there are divergent opinions on the idea of how strong this defense might be. So some psychologists say that unmanaged mental health conditions can cause people to act in seemingly uncharacteristic ways. It can cause extreme behavior. And there are other experts who say that that's not the case. But is this question something that's dividing fans? What are people saying online about it?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's important to remember that there's been contradictory statements made by Kanye about his diagnosis with bipolar. So in 2016, it was reported that he'd been diagnosed with bipolar. But in early 2025, he was in a podcast and he said, I was misdiagnosed with bipolar, I'm actually autistic. Then there were multiple statements that he made where he claims he was misdiagnosed, but he was basically saying that he was being purposefully misdiagnosed by doctors from the Jewish community as part of a secret ploy to keep him quiet. And then once again, like you say, he has this conversation with the rabbi, and he's back to saying, I have bipolar disorder, and he's asking for grace and space and kindness. And then in this Wall Street Journal ad, he's doing the same thing. So it's very confusing for diehard fans of Kanye who are hanging on his every word. Do you have bipolar or do you not have bipolar? Because you've come out and said it before and then you've backtracked. Now, a lot of people online are saying he's also saying other things that are leading to basically the destruction of his life, his relationship with the mother of his children, his access to his kids. This is all widely and publicly documented. This has been going on alongside those anti-Semitic remarks. And they're saying it all speaks to a broader picture that Kanye really does have genuine mental health struggles and he needs to be protected. And those people who are saying that are saying, why on earth did Wireless book him as the headline performer for a 3-day festival? This is not a man who went away for 5 years, has come to terms with his mental health struggles, has come to terms with what medication he needs to be on, is speaking to psychologists, has mended his relationship with his family, has mended his relationship with his fans, with his community. This is somebody who asked for grace and space and to find his way home in 2025. It's irresponsible for the festival to book him, and they did it because they know they're going to get maximum publicity and maximum headlines. That's one camp of his fans, and other people are saying we just do not buy this. He's apologized before, he resecures the distribution deals, he resecures the brand deals, people feel sorry for him, and then he comes out, and if it's not anti-Semitic remarks, it's something else. It's blatant misogyny, it's racism. I mean, those are the two camps, and they're going back and forth. But I will say there has been a pretty forgiving response online to Kanye West.
If you or I or most people that we knew said enormously offensive and anti-Semitic things, we would be ostracized in society, roundly criticized, and rightly so. It seems like somehow Kanye West is an exception. What have the consequences been for him for the things he said and done?
Well, if you'd have asked me that 2 weeks ago, I'd have had a different answer. But what's happened with Wireless and him being denied entry into the UK is probably the clearest, strongest and loudest piece of backlash that he's faced in the way he's been held accountable. Now, we can get into whether that should have happened and the reaction to that on social media and the reaction from his fans. But that is the first time in a long while that we've seen somebody vocally say you are going to be held accountable for what you've tweeted, for the song you've made, for the t-shirts that you've put out. It's led to the cancellation of the festival. Like I said, if you asked me this before all of that happened, I would have said that Kanye exists in a space in our culture where he's almost uncancelable. But I still think he's uncancelable because that's happened, and a lot of people are commenting, you know, how can you do this? You're trying to censor him. He has a right to free speech. He has a right to artistic expression. You need to show him grace. He's come out and spoken publicly about his mental health as a man. That's a very difficult thing to do, especially as a black man and a black male rapper. He's shown his vulnerability, and your response is to say you're denied access to the country and we're going to show you no grace. I think he's uncancelable. I actually do think he has crafted a perfect defense for himself.
So how much does it actually mean for him financially to not be allowed into the UK to perform at this festival?
So we don't know what deal he'd entered into with Wireless. We do know that he had another gig that was lined up in London. That's now also had to be cancelled. Obviously, the UK is a massive market for Kanye West, and him being able to perform here would have, in a lot of his fans' minds, been the pinnacle of his redemption arc. He hasn't performed in the UK for many, many years, and it would have spoke to a comeback for Kanye West, which is really realistically financially what he needs. He's gone into that distribution deal with Gamma. He needs to make money. He's lost a lot of his sponsorship, he's lost his brand partnerships, and also, which a lot of people are not reporting on, he is facing multiple civil lawsuits in the US, all of which count for if they're all granted, if all of the claimants win, we're talking millions of dollars that he will have to pay out. So financially, he's in actually quite a difficult position. You've got to remember he's also no longer married to a billionaire who can help bail him out, as Kim Kardashian has done in the past. I think she gave him $35 million when he was in debt with Yeezy. Bianca Censori does not have that kind of money. I'm not saying Kanye doesn't have a dime to his name, but this is a financially difficult year for him, and he has already lost one of those civil lawsuits where he's had to pay out to a construction worker who was working on one of his properties. He's already lost one, and he is facing more serious ones as the year progresses. So whilst him not being able to headline at Wireless probably hasn't dented his pockets that much, it kind of puts a stop to that redemption arc. It gives a stop to the apology tour of Kanye West, which can provide a stop to future potential earnings. He needs those earnings going forward.
Yeah, I mean, he has to keep performing from what you're saying, because of the future financial burdens he might face. And he is still performing. Just last week, he performed in Los Angeles to tens of thousands of people who were prepared to pay money to come and see him in spite of all the things that he said. Is that a sign, Anushka, that anti-Semitism in society is something that is tolerated now, in some sectors at least? There are figures, Anushka, there are figures. So a huge rise in anti-Semitic attacks in the United States over the last 5 years. The UK government figures suggest a 150% increase almost in anti-Semitic attacks in 2023 alone. Jewish groups in Britain have said they didn't want him to perform in the UK. The Campaign Against Anti-Semitism has said Mr. West has previously made apologies right before album releases and concert tours, and then retracted the apology and reverted to type. Is Kanye West profiting from anti-Semitism?
I think Kanye West has been profiting off of the culture's willingness to forgive him for being an anti-Semite, for being a misogynist, for being racist. One of the last things you said about reverting to type, working its way through the court system, as I keep saying, multiple pieces of civil litigation. And one of the defenses that is being used by his lawyers, this year, being in multiple cases, is that Kanye's whole life is performance art. Kanye cannot be held responsible for anything he said because it's an extended version of performance art, and that extends to his anti-Semitic remarks. That is not him taking responsibility and accountability and saying, I take accountability, please give me space because I have bipolar and I want to earn your forgiveness and your trust back. That's saying, yeah, I said it, but it's art. It's provocative. And I want to read you this direct quote. This is speaking to a lawsuit where one of the people who work for him is saying that she heard anti-Semitic comments, that she was victimized personally by Kanye West. And he says the communications she challenges, his lawyer's writing this, were creative directives, conceptual drafts, provocative imagery, marketing strategy, and staffing decisions shaping a public-facing message. They were not collateral to Ye's art, they were part of its development. Now, it goes on to say, Ye is not merely a creator, he is art. Ye's public and private personas form a continuous provocative performance that challenges societal taboos surrounding race, religion, gender, power, politics, and censorship. That is not taking accountability for anti-Semitic comments. So you've got two conflicting messages, one in what he said in the Wall Street Journal, what he said to leaders in the Jewish community, and one that's making its way through the courts. And because people will not report on what is happening in the court system because nobody cares, I think a lot of the memification of what Kanye has said about the Jewish community, his overtly anti-Semitic remarks have been turned into humorous tidbits on the internet. And when you try and talk to publications and say, do you know about this lawsuit? Are you going to report on this? They say, everybody knows Kanye is a bad guy. No one's going to be interested in that. So he has crafted, I don't know if it's intentional. I don't know if it's a, he's saying that this is because of his mental illness. Okay. Because of his bipolar. But there is the perfect defense against any crime because people won't pay attention and take it seriously because Kanye's always doing something bad. He's always saying something outrageous. And it is infuriating when you are trying to cover him and say, actually, there are people out there who say they have been genuinely victimized by this man. Genuinely victimized.
That was Anushka Mutanda-Dawati, host of the BBC's Fame Under Fire podcast. In a statement, Wireless Festival said it was cancelled and refunds would be issued to all ticket holders. It added that multiple stakeholders had been consulted ahead of booking West and, quote, no concerns were highlighted at the time. It continued, anti-Semitism in all its forms is abhorrent, and we recognise the real and personal impact these issues have had. Kanye West has previously denied allegations of victimizing his former employee. And that's it for today's episode. The Global Story is also an audio podcast. You can find us every weekday on bbc.com or wherever you listen. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Cheerio.